This morning, Westminster exploded. Nigel Farage just ended Keir Starmer's career live on camera, and the entire world watched Britain's government collapse in real time. The House of Commons fell silent, then chaos. Farage rose with a folder in his hand, confidential documents proving what millions suspected. Starmer's office had been hiding foreign lobbying ties, border policy failures, and secret funding scandals buried for months. As Farage read each line aloud, gasps echoed through the chamber. Names, dates, money trails that led straight to Downing Street. Labour ministers frantically whispered to each other, their faces draining of colour. Phones buzzed across the front bench. Even Starmer's own MPs looked away, unable to defend what they were hearing. The evidence wasn't speculation. It was damning, documented, and undeniable. This is the story they don't want you to see. Hit subscribe right now, because what happens next will shock you. Trust me, you don't want to miss a second of this. Farage's voice cut through the noise like a blade. This country deserves truth, not tyranny. You've silenced voices, crushed dissent, and betrayed the people who trusted you. Today that ends. Every camera in the chamber locked onto him. Every journalist's hand trembled as they typed. This wasn't just another parliamentary debate. This was an execution. Starmer sat rigid, his knuckles white as he gripped the bench. The Prime Minister, once untouchable, once the man who lectured others on integrity, now sat exposed before the entire nation. His face told the story his words couldn't. Pale, shocked, cornered. Behind him, cabinet ministers exchanged desperate glances, already calculating their exit strategies. The opposition benches erupted in cheers. Conservative MPs punched the air. Reform Party members chanted. Security moved forward, hands on radios, unsure whether to intervene or stand back. The Speaker's gavel slammed again and again, the sound echoing off Westminster's ancient walls. But order was gone. Britain's political system was on fire, and everyone could feel the heat. Then came the moment no one could have scripted. Starmer rose to respond, his voice trembling as he tried to project authority, to regain control of the narrative. But Farage didn't even let him finish. He turned away mid-sentence, holding the evidence folder high above his head like a trophy. Victory declared without a single word. The gesture said everything. You're finished and everyone knows it. The chamber exploded. MPs leapt to their feet, shouting, fury, disbelief. Parliament hadn't seen chaos like this in decades. Some called it theatre, others called it revolution. But everyone agreed on one thing. British politics would never be the same. Outside, protesters who'd gathered for what they thought would be a routine session suddenly roared with excitement. Farage! 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 The chant spread through Westminster like wildfire, bouncing off government buildings and shaking windows. Police lines struggled to contain the surging crowd as people climbed barriers, waving flags and filming everything on their phones. Within minutes, footage hit every platform. Twitter exploded with hashtags. Hashtag Farage exposes Starmer. Hashtag Downing Street collapse. Hashtag Britain in crisis. TikTok videos went viral showing Starmer's face at the moment of exposure, replayed in slow motion again and again. Instagram stories flooded with reaction clips. YouTube news channels scrambled to go live. Britain had one story, and the world was watching every second unfold. Inside Downing Street, absolute panic. Advisors rushed through narrow corridors, phones pressed to their ears, voices hushed and urgent. Emergency meetings convened in rooms usually reserved for war briefings. Ministers whispered of resignations. Some were already drafting statements distancing themselves from the Prime Minister. The Home Office scrambled to issue responses. The Treasury refused comment. Even the Foreign Office went silent, afraid of saying anything that could make things worse. Within the hour, the Prime Minister's convoy was photographed leaving through a back exit. Faces grim behind tinted windows. Where was he going? No one would say. The press office stopped answering calls. Downing Street's famous black door remained closed, a symbol of a government in hiding. Political commentators called it an earthquake, the kind that reshapes nations. Opposition leaders held emergency press conferences, their faces barely containing their glee. This government has lost all moral authority, one declared. The Prime Minister must resign immediately. Social media agreed. Polls released that evening showed Labour's support collapsing in real time. A political nosedive unseen in modern British history. But this wasn't just about politicians and polls. Real people were watching, and their reactions told a different story. Sarah Mitchell, a nurse from Liverpool, posted a video from her kitchen that went viral overnight. "I voted for them because they promised change," she said, her voice breaking. "They promised honesty. And this whole time, they were lying to us. I feel like an idiot." Her video was shared 200,000 times in 6 hours. In a Birmingham pub, regulars gathered around the TV, watching the replay of Farage's speech. "About bloody time someone said it," one man muttered into his pint. Others nodded in agreement. The mood wasn't celebration. It was vindication mixed with anger. They'd suspected the truth for months, and now they had proof. University students in Edinburgh organised an impromptu protest, marching through the streets with banners reading, "Democracy demands better," and "No more lies." Even young people who'd never cared about politics were suddenly paying attention. This wasn't boring parliamentary procedure. This was real, raw, and impossible to ignore. By evening, the crisis had crossed every border. In Washington, White House officials held emergency calls with the British ambassador. President Biden's aides were reportedly deeply concerned about the stability of America's closest ally. An unnamed Pentagon official told CNN, "We're witnessing a constitutional crisis in real time. This affects NATO. This affects global security. We're watching very closely." Brussels watched with a mixture of shock and grim satisfaction. Years of Brexit tension had left deep scars, and now the European Commission saw a weakened Britain as both a risk and an opportunity. French President Macron reportedly said in a private meeting, "Britain wanted sovereignty. Now they're discovering what instability looks like." Emergency sessions were scheduled to assess trade and security implications as the pound's value slipped lower by the hour. Russian state media had a field day. They aired dramatic montages of Farage's speech under headlines mocking Western democracy. "The British Empire crumbles from within," read one banner. Kremlin commentators called it proof that Western democratic systems were collapsing under their own hypocrisy. Intelligence agencies across Europe warned that adversarial states were already exploiting Britain's chaos online, flooding social media with disinformation designed to deepen the divide. Beijing's reaction was more calculated. Chinese officials released a brief statement urging stability and restraint, but behind closed doors, analysts in Zhongnanhai discussed what a fractured Britain meant for global strategy. A distracted West meant opportunity, strategic openings in trade negotiations, weakness in the Five Eyes intelligence alliance. The geopolitical implications were enormous. Financial markets agreed. The FTSE dropped 3% in a single afternoon. The pound fell to its lowest point against the dollar in months. Investors pulled billions from UK assets, fearing the leadership collapse could trigger a wider economic shock. From Tokyo to New York, trading floors watched Britain's crisis with nervous eyes. By day 3, Britain wasn't just in crisis. It was on the edge of something much bigger. Protests erupted in every major city. Manchester saw thousands march through Piccadilly Gardens. Glasgow's George Square filled with angry crowds. Cardiff city centre echoed with chants. And in London, Downing Street was surrounded by a sea of people demanding one thing. "We want an election now." They stood in the rain, waving flags and placards, their voices hoarse from hours of chanting. "Let the people decide," shouted one group. "Starmer out," roared another. Police lines struggled to contain the surging masses as protesters climbed barriers and lit flares that turned the night sky crimson. The sound of drums, horns and shouting rolled through Whitehall like thunder. Inside Number 10, Starmer's closest advisers begged him to step down gracefully. "Announce an election before this gets worse," they pleaded. "Save what dignity you can." But he refused, exhausted and defiant. "Britain needs stability, not surrender," he insisted. Yet even as he spoke those words, the reality outside his window told a different story. Stability was already gone. Opposition leaders sensed blood in the water. Conservative Party chiefs, Reform UK MPs and independent voices stood united for the first time in years, all calling for an immediate vote. Nigel Farage himself emerged again, this time on Parliament's steps, speaking to a roaring crowd of thousands. His message was clear and thunderous. "The people have spoken. This government no longer represents you. They've lied, they've hidden the truth, and they've betrayed your trust. The time has come to take back control once and for all." His words ignited something deep in the national consciousness. A hunger for change, a demand for accountability, a cry for renewal that couldn't be ignored. Even Labour MPs began breaking ranks. Backbenchers quietly told reporters they could no longer defend their leader. Some submitted letters of no confidence. Others simply stopped showing up to meetings. The parliamentary party was fracturing in real time, splitting between those still loyal to Starmer and those desperate to save their own careers. That evening, Parliament convened for an emergency debate. The chamber was packed, tension crackling in the air like electricity before a storm. MPs shouted across the floor. "Resign!" echoed from every corner. "Election now!" Conservative benches chanted in unison. Even the Speaker struggled to maintain order, his voice barely audible over the chaos. At midnight, leaks from inside Downing Street confirmed what everyone suspected. Senior civil servants had entered number 10 with a message Starmer couldn't ignore. The government could not function. Confidence had collapsed. The cabinet was divided. The streets were restless. The nation was leaderless. Without immediate action, Britain risked a complete breakdown of democratic order. Social media exploded with the news. #StarmerResign trended worldwide. Crowds outside number 10 grew louder, sensing the end was near. News channels switched to 24-hour live coverage. Reporters camped outside the famous Black Door, waiting for movement, for any sign of what would happen next. Then at 6 a.m, as dawn broke over London, the door finally opened. Starmer stepped out, pale and weary, dark circles under his eyes. Camera shutters clicked like machine guns, microphones thrust forward. The world held its breath. After consultation with His Majesty the King and the Cabinet, he began, his voice barely steady, "I will request the dissolution of Parliament. The British people will have their say." The rest of his words drowned in an eruption of cheers. Britain had its answer. The election was coming. Fireworks lit Westminster's sky. Chants of "democracy wins" filled the streets. After weeks of chaos, tension and fury, there was finally release. People hugged strangers. Flags waved. The sense of relief was palpable, like a storm finally breaking after days of oppressive heat. But beneath the celebration, everyone knew the truth. The damage was done. Trust in government had shattered. The old political order lay in ruins. Whatever came next would reshape Britain for a generation. In pubs across the nation, people spoke with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Who would lead next? Could Farage's momentum carry him to number 10? Would Labour recover, or was this the end of their dominance? Would the Conservatives seize their chance? No one knew. The only certainty was that Britain had crossed a line it could never uncross. The election was coming, not as a choice but as a reckoning. A battle not just for power, but for the soul of the nation. And one question echoed louder than all others, whispered in living rooms, debated in newsrooms, and argued about in every corner of the country. Is this the moment Britain finally fights back against broken promises and political corruption, or the beginning of its collapse into chaos and division? Drop your answer in the comments right now. Are you Team Farage or Team Starmer? Do you think Britain made the right choice? Or is this the biggest mistake in modern political history? And if you want to see what happens next in this political war, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this story is far from over. The election campaign is about to begin, and it's going to be the most brutal, most dramatic fight for power Britain has seen in decades. Britain just changed forever. Don't miss what comes next.